Hi, Kevin. What was your first computer?
So my first computer was so if you don't count this strange German VTech learning computer thingies, then it was so in German we say it 486er or 86. Yeah.
Uh-huh. 48. Okay, this was it's actually a beefy machine. So 486 was crazy. This was the one computer before Pentium, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then it was back then. It was not really was the old computer from my dad. I got it, and mostly for playing DOS games or something, I think. And then after this, I got my own, which was a Celeron based system. Then.
So your first contact with the computer, so you played games. So what you did the very first time as you saw a computer, started playing games.
Yes, so that's the first thing I remember, but my father told me like when I was even younger, maybe 3 years old or so, and he had like a terminal system or something at home. I was just like typing on the keyboard and seeing the text on the terminal and having fun with it, but that's I don't recall it personally.
Hey, cool. So who is your father? Is a programmer?
No, zero. So he's electrician, had an electric company, but he was always very interested in technical stuff, also in what's the English term of it?
Hacker.
Radio controlled cars, actually.
Oh, cool. So he's actually a true hacker, right?
Yeah, but on the electronic and mechanical level more.
Yeah, sure.
But yes, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And he also like. Back then more, but still today, like did professional like competitions with the radio controlled cars, like races and championships and so on.
Oh, really? Races?
Yeah.
How does this work? So very briefly.
So there's a real professional scene behind it. So you have different racetracks all over the world. Actually, there are different leagues like German League, European World Championship, different classes depending on the size, depending on the models, on the power of the engine and so on. And you like have a real professional technique stuff behind it. So they have like a transponder inside the car. So the laps get recorded correctly and so on. It's like a real race. Yes. And he was all over the world with it. Like he was in the World Cup in Beijing, on Hawaii.
Hey, it is great.
2 years ago, we actually went to a World Cup. I was just like as a guest there in Las Vegas.
Nice. And is this off-road or is it on-road? What?
Yes, both. So back then he was mainly focusing on on-road, on-road with fuel engines. And nowadays he's more into off-road with electric engines.
Oh, cool.
But yes, you have like those two classes.
So it means that your father is playing all the time, right?
Yeah, so at one point he stopped his electric company and actually switched to a like it's kind of a sales position or like leading sales position in one of the companies that distributes those cars in Europe. So most of them come from Japan nowadays.
Okay.
And therefore now he made his hobby to his job.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what brands are the cars? So what's the names? So I remember from my youth it was Tamiya. What I remember.
Yes. And Tamiya exists.
What else? So there's Tamiya and.
So like he's working with Mugen Seiki, which is one of the most professional ones. Yes, it's not in the normal hobby sector. I would say it's just in the competition sector. And back then we were doing a lot of Kyosho with another one.
Yeah, that's what I know from this is older.
Yeah, and they also still exist, but they also go into this hobby direction with like small tanks and planes and so on. And Mugen Seiki, for example, just does professional cars. Yeah, and Tamiya, of course, is probably the biggest one, but they are not that strong in the professional sector. They are more broad in all the hobbyist styles with also model kits and so on. Yeah.
That is great. Okay, so now we could talk forever for this, but in one point we have focused at least a little bit on Java. So you, what I'm interested in. So you played on, you hacked on terminal from your father. Then you got 486, and you wanted to play games. Which games? You remember the games? Wing Commander, I guess.
No, it was not Wing Commander. I think it was kind of strategy game. So I could say it was Civilization, but I'm sure it was not Civilization. But
Something
in my
like this,
memory,
okay.
it looked something like this. So like kind of overview strategy games. And I tried to get into adventures, but I'm not sure if I could really read back then. Or probably I couldn't read English. That was the problem, yes.
Okay. And how much time do you spend with computers back then? What, 1 hour a day, 5 hours, or all the time?
So actually, there was a short time where I was very interested in the computer, and then I kind of switched to like the console gaming stuff, like
Okay.
really like toys like Super Nintendo and so on, Super Nintendo, PlayStation.
Mhm.
And then there was really a longer period where I was not that actively doing things with a computer or programming or whatever. And this, when did it start again? Maybe in school or so. Yeah, so at least programming I started in high school, so German Gymnasium.
Mhm.
Yeah, with quick basic. We had a course there where this was taught.
So what I understood is you started hacking your father's terminal with 3, then you got 486. How old were you back then? Roughly.
Roughly.
10.
So younger than 10, probably.
Okay. You played Civilization strategy games. Then you switched to Nintendo and came back in gymnasium, which is high school.
Yeah.
And with 12, probably, right? 13, you saw Visual Basic.
Quick Basic.
Quick Basic.
Then,
Okay, this is DOS based. Okay. And you liked Quick Basic?
Yes, so it was all I knew back then. Like this was the only programming concept I knew, and so also then I was interested in making like text adventure stuff with it.
Okay.
But I think we in school we just learned the very basic control structures, which meant so I didn't know about anything like subroutines or function or so. So in the end, the text adventure was a gigantic single file of if-else branching.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and your very first line of code was Hello World in Quick Basic?
Yeah, pretty sure. Quick Basic, Hello World, yes.
Perfect. So your first programming language was Quick Basic, and you enjoyed that from the first line, or was it like, terrible school assignment?
No. I enjoyed it. We even, so back then it was not really part of the curriculum to do programming in our computer science class at high school. It was more about learning how to use Word and PowerPoint and things like this kind of. But we pushed the teacher to do programming with us, and I think
this is
another colleague, he already was a little bit more into this, and he then digged out all these Quick Basic tutorials and showed the teacher and said we should do this. Yeah.
Okay, poor teacher, actually, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it. Okay, and so you stick with QBasic then. How long? What was your next? So the first thing was in the school. It was one huge file, and what it did? Was it text adventure or did it something else?
Yeah, there were text adventure things, and I know another thing was around Christmas time, like a advent calendar or something. Also Quick Basic, and then rendering like the tables in the DOS console and things like this. Yeah.
Very cool. And the next thing after your Christmas app, do you remember that?
So,
or you switched to a different language?
No. Yeah, so in when I then started the Abitur, which I don't know if there is an English term for it, we also got a different computer science teacher.
So Abitur is the final exam in the high school in Germany, I guess, also in Austria and in most European countries, right? So this is the Abitur.
Yeah, and you have like this 3-year period where you get prepared for this or do like all the sub exams and so on.
Yeah.
then we had a different teacher, which was a super great math teacher also, and he was at the same time at university giving lectures there. So it was really, really high level of math and computer science he did with us. Like back then, most of us didn't understand it, but nowadays I think it was really awesome what he did with us. And there I'm not sure if he first showed us C++, but we also had Java then at one point.
Oh.
So I'm not sure which came first. Yeah.
So you started with QBasic and then probably immediately started with Java.
Yeah, or maybe C++, not sure. But
Okay.
if I think about it, C++ would be weird, but maybe it was like this.
And you know the Java version, roughly?
Maybe 1.4? Is it even 1.4? So it was earlier than 5.
So you are pretty young. So you are a youngster, actually, right?
Yeah.
Very good. So it's one of the youngest Java hackers I had on the show, probably, except Dashner. Cool.
So now I'm 32.
Yeah,
so
this is like a hipster, you know. So you should drive Tesla, drink coffee, and you have AeroPress.
So I'm very into coffee, yes.
Yeah,
but
me as well.
Yeah, my fiance don't want me to get an AeroPress. She said like it's a useless device. Just use a normal coffee machine.
But AeroPress is very cheap.
Yeah, and I also think it's cool. And I always tell her like it's basically space technology behind it.
Yeah, but this is like, you know, the plastic pipe with paper filter. What I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it is space because the guy who invented AeroPress, he invented also the how it's called the Aerobi is the company I think behind which had world record in. It looks like a boomerang. I don't know how to call it. A frisbee.
Okay.
Frisbee. Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. So we are both into coffee. Interesting. So you started with JDK 1.4, and I think and what was your impression of Java? So how you like Java after knowing QBasic?
So I know one of the first things he wanted to show us was object orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing back in school he showed us to highlight the possibilities of object orientation was polymorphic dispatch.
Wow.
And I think back then no one understood this.
Okay. I would really. It would be interesting now to see the reaction of the pupils in your classroom. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was just like empty faces, also not sure.
Okay. And you got it back then or no?
Kind of, maybe rough the abstraction, but not really what it means in the end.
Mm-hmm. What I remember, my first contact with object was like, I said, what the teacher is talking about. I mean, at the end of the day, just, you know, bits. Why I should care about object and all the crap? I would just write whatever the computer understands and I'm over. And the whole philosophy about writing something beautiful, whatever, doesn't count. This was my first impression with the whole object orientation. Like, you know, some smart ass, you know, invented something no one is interested in, and now we all have, you know, to learn this strange philosophy. This was my first 5 minutes with object orientation as I saw it, but yeah. Cool. And
I remember another thing, like we used a special Java environment back then. It was BlueJ, yes.
Hey, cool. Based on that
BlueJ. Yeah.
And you liked that?
But also like back then I didn't like it because it was stupid for me to click on the things to like create the objects and then make it call a function or a method. But now I think it's actually a good idea to teach the concepts.
Yes. You know Scratch?
Yes.
It's also similar. So one point I tried to do something with it. It's like, oh man, this is so hard because I have to to find the right block and just, you know, and it's really hard to think visually because, you know, if you can program, you can write everything quickly down with this whole thing. But for starting, it's great because you cannot make, you know, syntax errors.
Yes.
Cool.
And I think it gives also like ideas about how programming could look in the future, that like programming is not writing characters, but it's more like manipulating the syntax tree or whatever.
Yeah, but what I think is the future could be still ASCII. And why I'm so almost sure is because if you look at the writers and all the people who don't do programming, they still enjoy something like Markdown. So most of the people, high-end professionals, they have something like ASCII or Markdown, very simple technology, to capture the thoughts and for creative work. So it could be something into text that if we look at text is simple and you are not distracted by colors. So I don't think the whole idea of visual programming is a good one, but yeah, it's just, my thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree with you in this, like totally basically, but I don't think that the act of interacting with the source code should be by manipulating the characters or like, so I don't know, like if I'm using the refactorings in IntelliJ or whatever, it feels really good, like really transforming the code in steps that always like produce a kind of working program again after the step. So this is, I know Kent Beck also like is a little bit looking into this or talking about this, maybe more in the domain of small talk, not sure. But yeah.
So what you're saying is sometimes it is good just to directly manipulate the AST without mocking with ASCIIs, right?
Yeah. I think it's kind of a logical way to interact with it. And like, okay, with Java, we have at least a decent compiler that catches a lot of stupid syntax errors or whatever. But in other languages, sometimes you get really stupid bugs just by manipulating characters as your main editing way.
So absolutely true. So now, what you did, the first serious project with Java, you remember, or fun project, doesn't have to be serious, something beyond Hello World. You remember that?
So in back still in school, we did kind of a chat client, but with BlueJ probably.
And
so, but I don't think we could really understand what we were doing back then.
Okay.
Like network communications wise also.
Cool.
So yeah. Then the first thing I really did for myself, where I would think it had kind of a purpose in any way, was then in university, where we also did Java all the time, and I made like a small Java tool for like zipping, like compressing and decompressing files, and I call it JCompress probably. I don't know.
By the way, this is this. I did something similar, and I also did it in Java, and probably it was also JZip or JCompress. And the killer feature I had is, I don't know why, but I had the use case where I had to split a large zip into multiple floppies.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I wrote a Java program to do that with, of course, Swing, because I needed this for my own thing, and probably to transport, the Java libraries, because as I started with Java, there were not even collections, so we had, to have collection libraries and all the jars and zips. They were quite big, and also, Java Studio Workshop is like one of the first, or Java Workshop, Sun Java Workshop was one of the first IDEs. And there was, and so I wrote the program just to split the floppies. So this was interesting. I absolutely forgot about that, but you remember me this, okay?
Yeah. So I was also, I don't know if it did splitting. Maybe it also did splitting. Not sure. I think it came out of a exercise we had to do at university, and then I wanted to make more in a program thing with a UI also.
Yeah. Cool. And it worked?
I think it worked, yeah. So I also went to the professor then, super proud, and I remember the UI was like one window and then one button that was as big as the window that would say compressed or something like this, yeah.
Yeah, of course. This was an accessible application, right? So.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and there was a properly pink button with lots of animations, I can imagine.
Yeah, definitely were some funky style stuff, yes.
Okay, so and then in the university, this was a university assignment, and after, did you something else interesting at the university with Java?
Yeah, so our university was very Java focused. So all the stuff or most courses would do stuff in Java and would try to highlight different aspects of our field or like web programming or whatever, but always with Java behind it most of the time.
Okay.
So we did funny stuff. We did like a snake game, a Tetris game. So I remember the games very clearly.
Incredible. Where you started?
What can you say?
Where you started? Where was it? In which city was your university?
Okay, yes, in Gelsenkirchen. It's back then it was called Fachhochschule Gelsenkirchen. So
Cool.
Fachhochschule is like University of Applied Sciences.
Yeah.
Nowadays it's called Westphalian University of Applied Sciences.
Cool. A nice university. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you did some games and something else?
Yeah, so then for bachelor, my bachelor thesis was Android based. So of course you also would program Java back then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this was like a audio guide thingy for a museum, but then on your phone. And at this time, NFC was just released, or the NFC API in Android was just released.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to do something with NFC so that if you tap the phone at the NFC marker in the museum, you would then see the information instead of scanning a QR code or whatever. Yes, and we thought this was a super cool idea. We also like wanted to make a company out of this and sell it to museums and so on. This whole system, which consisted of a Android app and a content management system like backend. But we found out museums don't have money, at least in North Rhine-Westphalia.
Mm-hmm.
So it was not a fruitful endeavor.
Okay. And after university, so after failing as a museum startup, so how you get the job? So what you did after the university? So you still stick with Java?
Luckily, or what means luckily, but yes. So I did bachelor, master at the university, and then I joined GData, which is a security company, also here in the region. Like they are mostly famous for their antivirus software. But I was joining a new team that was developing more like server components or server-based systems for special security fraud use cases in the financial sector, so to say. And there was a new team growing, and I was actually the first developer to join it. And then we started there with a Spring application.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, it was already Spring Boot. It was the time when Spring Boot was released then.
And what your application did?
So it, I can't go too much into detail.
No, but just roughly. I'm just interested.
Yeah, just roughly. So there was a sensor component running in a browser somewhere as a JavaScript,
mm-hmm.
and then we had multiple backend components, and the sensor running in a browser at a customer or whatever, in a client, would check for like range stuff in the DOM, in the rendered DOM, or like maybe malicious content coming in there, and then but just gather all the data, and then the backend system would check for different indicators of compromise, or have like a risk factor scoring to see if the site has been manipulated in the way it was rendered in the browser. So the main use case of this is finding banking Trojan manipulations.
Yeah, cool. And was it successful, your Spring Boot service?
It was super duper successful. Yes,
cool.
Amazingly. So it was really one of the. I think it was really the first big mature project I did, and also with the team there. And we hit all the deadlines pretty good. The whole concept worked. So the general idea worked. Like finding those banking Trojans manipulations, it was really, really good. So at the beginning at least, and then of course the banking Trojans start to adapt and try to evade and so on. But actually what happened nowadays, banking Trojans isn't a big market anymore. So that's the most thing why they gone away.
And how many Trojans your software found back then? Can you remember this roughly, if you can tell it?
So there were 2 or 3 families that were active.
Okay.
And they were very visible if they did the manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And we've definitely found it every day. So every day maybe a couple, but less than 10, but probably 1, 2 every day. Yes.
Yeah, not bad. Actually, yeah, incredible. And you still at GData?
No. So we worked on the system a couple of years, and also like a follow-up system to this, adapted to a new online banking and so on. And then I switched to Codecentric in Germany, a consulting company.
Mm-hmm. Why?
Beginning of
you search for new challenges, or?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So I was not so sure where the team and our subgroup was moving to in GData, and I was interested in new challenges, definitely, and also just to see something different for a change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so then I went to consulting and Codecentric, which was also great, but I was not that long there, so actually just half a year, and now I switched into academia, and I'm actually back at the university where I started, Westphalian University of Applied Sciences, in the Institute for Internet Security.
Cool.
And there I'm leading, and now the funny thing, I'm leading the blockchain research group there.
So I have to admit, now you are the hipster. So you have a blockchain. You are interested in AeroPress, and with blockchain, actually, it is very likely that you will get soon a Tesla, and yeah. So nice, but just kidding. But I think a blockchain. I mean, not the blockchain which supports to make you a millionaire, but the true blockchain is really, really interesting. So we should have a follow-up about that, because it reminds me a little bit about Git, how Git works internally. So I mean, the Merkle tree and so forth is interesting. Mm-hmm. And nice. So now you are the dream job, right? Because I mean, it never gets boring. This is for me a dream job, right?
Yes, so it definitely is a dream job. I also so I'm also doing my PhD there at this time. Mm-hmm. And I came there, so there was no
PhD.
group.
Sorry, what was your topic of your PhD?
This is yet to be defined, but it will be something about blockchain.
This is very agile. So it means you do PhD and the topic comes later. Lazy topic.
Yeah. So I also, like other PhD students, recommended this to me, have a just broad idea, start writing some first papers and then see where your story is heading to, and then make your actual PhD, and then you make a cumulative thesis. Yeah, that seems to be an efficient way to do it. Yeah.
This is actually cool.
But as you said, it's really a dream job, so I could build up my team. Have real cool international team now here, quite big actually, with 6 people now, so which is big for this university and this lab. And really cool. Before I was actually not interested in blockchain. So when I got this offer from the professor, I thought research would be cool, but blockchain, I'm not sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
But also because of the hype stuff and so on, I was burned by the hype. Yeah. But if you look into it, it's just cool. It's cool distributed systems.
Yeah, and challenging, because I don't know what your topic is, but to getting the throughput through a blockchain is not that trivial. So I think it's a really interesting topic.
Yeah. So what the example you give is a good example, because we are right now trying to get some benchmarking frameworks or whatever to better assess non-functional aspects of a blockchain system, like throughput and so on.
Cool. And I hope you're still doing Java, right?
Yes. So the blockchain stuff, you mostly have clients in all kind of languages.
Yeah.
But I personally always recommend, like also the students and so on that come join, to do the stuff in Java, or if you do some more black boxy stuff or testing, like just do the instrumentation with Groovy, for example. So I'm a big Groovy fan. Yeah.
Yeah. I also like Groovy, but the reason why I like Groovy is because you can start with Java and very easily, transform it to Groovy. So this is what I like the most. This is like I don't have to rethink the whole thing from the beginning. This is like PhD. You can start with Java and then make it more and more groovy out of that. So you're not forced from the beginning to start with complete strange syntax.
Yeah. So for me, especially some years ago, Groovy was just the more ergonomic Java in certain ways, because it was ergonomic for me as a programmer to express my ideas. Yeah, of course, Java is getting much better nowadays with the faster release cycle and the features coming in there. But a couple of years ago, especially, Groovy was such a blast to write, I think.
I actually won once innovation award in Germany in 2006 or 7 with Groovy. What I did is I hacked my heating, and what I wanted to do is to load on demand the algorithm over the wire. And of course, with Java, I had to recompile it because Java is not a dynamic language. So I loaded actually Java code as Groovy and was able to swap the optimization algorithms on the go.
Oh, very cool! Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually very simple and primitive, but I really like that. So, and the cool story was I can just use straight JUnit Java and to test the Groovy code. Then if it passed, it was automatically uploaded, and I knew it would work. So this was why I really think Groovy is pragmatic language.
Yes, definitely pragmatic language. So it's sometimes it's if you give it to a beginner or whatever, like maybe they can do too much wrong with it. So if you're not experienced enough, but yeah, if you have a good team or so on, I think Groovy is also a perfectly valid language for real production code, especially if you activate the static compiling.
Yeah, and I think the IntelliJ had something like, how it's called, was joint compiler, where they were able to compile Java and Groovy at the same time, right?
Yeah, so with Maven, you also have this, yes.
Yeah, cool. So, can you do whatever you like with the blockchain, or someone expects from you something working or an outcome, or what? How does it work?
So we have different research projects where we also have to deliver certain deliverables or artifacts or whatever, like reports and so on.
Okay.
But so mostly you try to do this so that the project is happy, and then you have the rest time to do the research you want to do. It's kind of a compromise, yeah.
Okay, so what would be really cool if you could, as a collateral damage, to publish some Vue libraries on GitHub, Java libraries, just, to manipulate blockchain or whatever. So this could be a nice outcome, right?
Yeah, definitely. But I think, I'm not sure, but I think most of the bigger blockchain application or blockchain, what is it, not frameworks, technologies, whatever, they have Java clients.
Yes, but whatever. But if you can, open source, whatever, could be interesting, right?
So definitely, if anything would come up, I'm also will push everyone to put it on GitHub and so on.
Now, of course, personal or private question. So I saw images from you, and you look like. So on one image, you look like the lead from Motorhead, and and this is what I forgot. His Lemmy, right? Lemmy with a Ford Mustang, I think, or something similar to this. And
I think it was Dodge Defender, yes.
Dodge and red Dodge and electric guitar. So I assume you can play guitar, right?
Yes.
And what are you playing?
So I have actually a couple of bands, but yes, one is a heavy metal band. So very 80s style classic heavy metal. The name is Iron Cobra.
Iron Cobra. So you have your own band.
Yes. We also have our own records, a couple of records, like 2 full-length albums. Currently working on the third one.
Can you provide me this to the show notes? So your band, the album, then the car, Dodge. What was the name? Dodge
Defender, I think.
Defender. That's actually a cool name. Dodge Defender.
Yes.
It's actually a really great name. Cool. So everything to show notes. I'm really interested. And so now now you know more a hipster. So this is where you saved your karma, because I don't think the AeroPress and Tesla hipsters don't like heavy metal from 1980s. So now your reputation is recovered, And
lucky,
yeah. And which bands do you like? Heavy metal band. So what are your favorites?
So of course, like the classic heavy metal bands, things like Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, but personally I'm even more into the 70s prog rock stuff and so on. Like Rush is one of my all-time favorite bands, and also the classic hard rock bands, Deep Purple, Led Zeppelin. Yeah.
Okay. And Metallica? You like Metallica?
I used to like it very much. Nowadays, not so much anymore. But the first 3 or 4 albums, at least, yes, I really love them.
And from the guitar play skills, so from the players, it's like what are the best, Metallica or the others one, or I don't know. So what's your impression?
I would say one of the best is the old guitar player from the Scorpions, Uli John Roth.
Oh, really?
Who's also from Germany, and he's still active, not with the Scorpions, but as a solo player. And yes, I think he's one of the best.
That's actually interesting. And when you started playing guitar?
When I was around 16.
Okay. And how long did it took until something, how to call it, audible came out? So I mean, could you play immediately, or it takes several weeks? On how much do you have to practice? So what's the guitar road to be a rock star?
So it takes a couple of weeks for sure, until you have like maybe some easy riffs. You can play like a Smoke on the Water, or one of the first I learned was TNT from AC/DC or something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then luckily we just formed the band real quick. Like we were all too bad to play in a band actually, but we still did it, and this helped enormously. So I was, from the very beginning, I was always playing in bands, and I think this was the key learning motivation to always go on learning.
Cool. And how good are you now? Can you play whatever you like from Jimi Hendrix, let's say, or is it possible? Would you manage to do this or not?
Yeah, so I would say I'm from the playing style. I'm a classic bluesy hard rock guitar player.
Okay.
So things that fall into this region, I can mostly learn quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Not as perfectly as Jimi Hendrix playing, but I can bring the musical idea around, I think. So yes, this is an area where I'm good, I hope, or good enough. So all that has this bluesy rock feeling.
So bluesy rock feeling, was it ZZ Top? Is this bluesy rock feeling?
Also this, yes. So it's like, so some hard rock things and so on, it's just like blues played faster, blues played harder from a music theoretical standpoint,
mm-hmm.
like note choices and so on. And those kinds of things I can comfortably play. But if you would look into things like country or jazz or whatever, that's where I'm not so comfortable. So there I have to struggle more, and I'm not good in improvising stuff or whatever.
So something like B.B. King, can you play that?
Yes.
So Thrill Is Gone?
Yes. So I also have like a blues band, or I'm part of a blues band where we never rehearse. We just meet for the concert, and then it's all improvisation mostly. And yeah, there we play B.B. King and stuff.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to ask you. Whether it is possible that if you listen to a song and then you can roughly play it without practicing. Is it possible? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
This is what I always was curious to know. How good. Yeah, okay, perfect. So now, sorry for the distraction.
Especially in blues, it's very possible, because in blues has a very simple, but not in a bad way, but simple theoretical structure underneath.
Mm-hmm.
So if you follow those rules, then you can't make that many mistakes. And then, of course, the art is knowing when and how to break the rules.
Yeah. This is the same as software engineering a little bit, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, if you write everywhere, 5 layers, most of the time, 4 of the layers are superfluous. Okay, now, sorry for the distraction, but the actual topic was test containers. So when you started with the idea of test containers?
So I'm not the founder of Testcontainers.
Mm-hmm.
So Testcontainers was, I have here some notes to give you the correct dates, has been first released 2015 from Richard North.
Mm-hmm.
And I joined as the third maintainer. So the maintainers are Richard North, Sergey Egorov, and I joined as the third one. And my journey started, I think it was 2016 at the Socrates conference. Socrates conference in Germany, which is a software craftsmanship and testing conference.
Okay.
And there someone gave a talk about a JUnit 5 extension he wrote for Docker, which was annotation based. So you would annotate your test classes with like add Docker extension something, then the image, then it would spin up the container for your test class. And I totally liked this idea, and we also needed it back then in our project. So when I came back, I kind of rewrote this idea for a Spock extension. So Spock is a Groovy testing framework we were using extensively back then. And we used it then internally, and it had the same concept. So you put an annotation at your class or at your method, and then it would start the container for the class or the method. And so we used it internally, and I also open sourced it. And some people from other companies, friends, were also started using it and liking it. And then Sergey from Testcontainers raised an issue in my GitHub project and asked if it's not better if I would join Testcontainers and basically migrate my Spock extension to use Testcontainers.
Okay. And are the other maintainers are still active, or are you the chief maintainer right now?
Yes, the others are active. So it's like with open source projects, I think often it comes like in waves where a certain person is more active than others, and then like after some months it takes over or whatever. But we three have been very persistent in maintaining it. I hope at least, and I think from a poor code contribution side, Richard and Sergey are like doing more than me. Sometimes I'm joking that I'm more like an evangelist, like speaking a lot about it, giving talks or whatever, but they do the actual work. But we are all active, but I think at the moment they are contributing more code than me.
You could even create a song about test containers,
Yes.
And like play at conferences. This could be actually fun.
Yes, maybe we could.
Okay, you know why Richard North started Testcontainers? What was his idea, or what was his first commit, or why?
So I back then he was in Japan working for some consulting company or something, and I'm pretty sure it even has something to do with blockchain, because back then they were like doing some kind of like repair work or whatever. Like there was this big Japanese blockchain company and they got broke.
Yeah.
And
where the majority had to be found in order to merge back, the things, right?
What do you mean?
There was by blockchain the incidents where they had, I think, a bug or something, and the problem was the bug could be only fixed if the majority of miners could join forces.
Yes, they made the hard fork. Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it was something related to this, or maybe the company was just fraudulent, whatever. But I think the company got like broke, but then their consulting company had to look into the stuff and gather some data from the systems or whatever. And I think there was some use case where he like needed to, I don't know, do database stuff or so on, or like test database stuff in a reliable way. And he found out it was a big pain for the team to have this shared database instances in CI and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's roughly the story. And then he came up with the idea of test containers and having this kind of ephemeral infrastructure components. And for me also, it was back then exactly this use case why we needed it. It was for Postgres database and like just having the database in the state you want on every developer's machine every time, and not having to come up with some clever tricks in the CI to manage multiple test databases or schemas or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. And was it Java from the beginning, the Testcontainers project?
Yes, so the Testcontainers project was Java from the very beginning. My own Spock extension, which, as I said, started without Testcontainers at first, was then a mix of Groovy and Java.
Yeah, but JVM based, so almost Java, I would say.
Yeah.
And do you know the very first Testcontainers usable version, what it did? It was like you had, to say new Testcontainers, pass the Docker image and start. Was it like that, or was it different? You know this?
So I'm pretty sure it directly started with the JUnit 4 integration.
Okay, with rule.
Because exactly the JUnit rule integration, because the JUnit rule integration is super hard coded into our code base.
Okay.
Which is not good, of course. This is an impediment we know we have to fix, and we are slowly progressing towards removing this hard integration. But yeah, therefore, I think it was always, or back then when it started, it was really the idea that the API is a JUnit rule. And just after some time and getting support for different test frameworks, we realized that the actual core should be test framework agnostic, and also that this API you described, like instantiating a container and then starting it, this can even be an API or library that has nothing to do with testing, that is just an object-oriented abstraction of Docker containers.
Yes, this is what I wanted to ask you. Why the project, the name is Testcontainers? For me, it looks like a nice API to Docker. So I don't have, to use the Docker CLI. I can use Java instead. So for me, your whole thing has nothing to do with testing.
Yeah. So sadly, it still has at the moment, but you're right. So we also observed that many users really love the API for all kinds of use cases when they want to interact with Docker containers. But since it really originated with the idea of having ephemeral containers for testing, and that's one of the core problems, that this ephemeral concept is built into the very heart of test containers, meaning that at least the lifecycle of the containers will be bound to the JVM process lifecycle. Mm-hmm. Which then means for certain use cases where you just want to have this Docker API, you can't use test containers, since the containers will be removed when the JVM exits.
The JVM is more or less like a watchdog, which observes the actual container, right?
Yeah, so it's a combination in our architecture nowadays. So initially, we had a second thread running in the JVM that would then remove the containers, also remove the containers on JVM exit. But of course, as you know, with shutdown hooks, you don't have the guarantees that they always get executed, especially if you would send a sick kill or whatever. And therefore, we extracted this functionality into another Docker container that is spawned by test containers. And this Docker container is called Ryuk, and it's kind of our test container sidecar container. We have a super tiny Go programming running inside it. And the JVM is communicating with this container to clean up resources, and it's also sending a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And if the JVM stops sending the heartbeat, then the container will start cleaning everything up.
For what you need the Go library? For what? To tightly integrate with Docker? What's the idea of the?
Yeah, so we just wanted to have a tiny container, and therefore we could just use a Scratch container with a small Go binary And we thought for interacting with the Go API, it's also nice to just use with the Docker API to just use Go directly. But we found out using the Docker API from Go is also not a great experience. But so the main use case of Go back then was to have a super slim sidecar container. Maybe nowadays, I think we sometimes discuss to do it with GraalVM or whatever. But
Quarkus. So Quarkus would be even easier. As a Quarkus wraps already GraalVM, but the outcome is Go-like library.
Yeah. So maybe in the future, this is something that we could look into it. Yeah. Also, there are
for the listener. Sorry, for the listener, just to summarize. So what the simplest possible? Let's hello world in with test containers would be. I think you have to add one dependency to Maven, then say new generic container, I think, and pass the name of the container. And now and the killer feature is now first killer feature is if you say start, it waits until it starts. And what I understood is you have different hooks, like almost like readiness probes, where you can ask the container, are you alive? You can parse logs or do whatever. So you will block at this point of time, which is for me the killer feature, because knowing when the container is up is the main challenge always. And then, this is the next cool thing, is I can ask the container, what is the actual IP address and what is the host or name? Because the IP address, I can start 20 Postgres databases and they will launch on different ports, because otherwise I would get collision. This is how to describe the hello world, right?
Yes. So also you highlighted exactly the points where I think test containers is most valuable. The one thing is that we give strong guarantees about the readiness of the application inside the container with our wait strategies. And you described it very nicely. We have kind of different probes. We call them wait strategies. We have a log-based wait strategy, port-based wait strategies, or we can also rely on Docker health check if it's implemented in the image. And the other thing is that we this dynamic port binding stuff, which is also just a Docker feature we use, but then we give you an API to easily find out how you can reach the container. And for certain special container implementations, like the database ones, we even give you directly an API to get the JDBC URL.
And not only JDBC URL, you get the instance of the JDBC driver.
Yes, this is also possible, and this is we also have a special Testcontainers JDBC driver you can use, and in this case, it will be like a proxy to your actual JDBC driver, and then once the JVM requests a connection to this JDBC driver, Testcontainers will transparently launch a container underneath, and this means you get this like H2 experience with test containers.
Yeah.
This use.
So what it means for me, I could write I just call it integration test. You have different names, but for me, I could just launch in my world the entity manager, and behind the entity manager's JPA entity manager would be, for instance, Hibernate or Eclipse Link, and they launch and they need a connection to a database in my integration test. So what I will do, there will be one annotation before class where I launch the Postgres database, or even before, but it's quickly enough so I could have a fresh database for every test. And then it launches. I fetch the port number, because host is localhost. Username and password are the same. Pass it to the entity manager, can test, and after that either I can say stop and then restart it, so I always get a fresh image, or I can keep the database running. This is my choice. This would be the sequence, right?
Yes, but it's not always localhost. So you should not use localhost. You should call get container IP address also and construct it like this. So get container IP address plus get port, because you don't know where the Docker daemon is running. So you could have a remote Docker daemon, and you would get it.
Okay, so this is already new. So you are also supporting remote container daemons?
Yes, and like completely transparently. And so our goal is that the code should run the same on the developer machines as in your CI environment. Especially in CI, people often have different setups, and Testcontainers tries to be like a little bit clever and opinionated about the discovery of the Docker environment.
Okay. How you communicate with Docker? Are you using the REST interface or are you using direct JNI?
We are using the REST interface of the Docker socket. So on Unix, on Linux actually, on Linux you have of course the Unix socket to talk with the Docker daemon. And on Windows, because of the way Docker for Windows works, you have to use a named pipe to do the actual communication over the pipe or over the socket. We used to use Netty, but we switched to OK HTTP at one point.
How it's called? OK HTTP, you said?
Yes.
Okay.
But we didn't write the integration code or the API code ourselves, so we are using Docker Java for this with another library, which is just the API, a very clean or very direct API translation into Java. So it's not object oriented it's just like the REST API, but you can call it from Java, kind of. And also, Sergey, one of our maintainers, now is involved in this library because we are one of the main users, and we try to contribute back some of the changes or some of the things we see a need for with going forward for test containers and also the Docker Java experience.
Okay. So from my impression, first, the first feedback regarding the hard coding, the rule in units. I think this is the right thing to do at the beginning of the project, to hard code as much as possible. Otherwise, you are just, playing with abstractions and you forget what you actually would like to implement. This is a way easier afterwards. If something is working in a project, get popular, to refactor the project, then from the beginning hit the right abstraction. So I think... so hard coding, I think, is a good thing, because otherwise your code becomes, too complicated from day one. And from the test containers perspective, what I really think should happen in one point of time, to split the container into parts, like the container part and the test part, because the waiting for a container to start and manipulating a Docker container, injecting things, reading, is incredibly valuable as well. And testing is one part, but the just launching the whole stuff is incredible. You could actually write your own small Kubernetes, with your thing just to start. Just for fun, just to starting and stopping containers. This is what you can very easily do.
Yeah. So we, as a team, as maintainers, totally agree with you on this thing. So that's also where we want to go to, and that's like one of the goals for Testcontainers 2.0. But one of the challenges of an open source project, even especially now since it gets a bigger adoption and more people start using it, like so this bigger refactoring or separation is something you need to do like a real one-time big joint effort. It's like not that many small steps, or you can't go on with so many small steps in this direction. So I think we kind of need at one time to do like a small hackathon together or whatever, just meet with the maintainers for a weekend and going forward, because else we will just go on talking about this, and it's hard that someone just starts the work on it also while at the same time feature development and bug requests go on. Yeah
completely agreement. So how big or complex is the project? Because the dependencies are pretty thin. So what is the challenge actually in test containers? The changing Docker API, or what's actually the main challenge developing the whole thing?
So you mean in general? Yeah. So since it's mostly integrative stuff we do, a lot of our tests are also integration tests, and those integration things are sometimes kind of complex because of the edge cases and the environment-specific cases. So I think one of the biggest challenges, for example, was to get good Windows support in there. So you would think, okay, you just interact with Docker. It should be the same in every environment. But like Docker for Windows had so many different quirks, so many specifics, and this was quite tough. And so we are supporting at least 3 different Docker implementations or Docker setups, even more actually, but the main ones are just Linux, where you directly interact with a Docker daemon. Then you have Docker for Mac, where Docker is already encapsulated in this tiny Linux virtual machine, but you're still running on a Unix system. And then you have Docker for Windows, where you again have a small Linux virtual machine running the Docker stuff, but then you're running on a Windows system. But from the outside Windows, once you to get the impression you are interacting with Docker directly on your local host, and just all kind of weird edge cases happen, especially if you're having more complex things. And then if you go into the CI world, things become even more complex in certain Kubernetes setups or whatever. You have certain constraints on the Docker daemon or on the way the containers get configured, like namespacing restrictions or whatever. And yes, then it's sometimes extremely hard to debug bugs people have in their own CI environment.
And what are you doing? Are you developing Linux, Windows, and Mac at the same time, or just focusing on Linux, or what's your job?
So as a team, the other 2 are having Macs, so therefore the local development they are doing always ensures Mac compatibility, so to say. And I'm mostly on Linux, and for back then I was the only one that also had a Windows to do the testing on Windows. But luckily we were able to integrate Windows into our CI now after switching to Azure DevOps pipeline, I think it's called nowadays. And so now we have this helped tremendously to at least give an idea if the changes are breaking Windows or not. So we are striving to support all 3 at the same time, since we achieved this baseline now. So we don't want to drop this baseline. But of course, only recent Windows with Docker for Windows. So people with the Docker for Toolbox stuff on Windows, it's kind of supported, but not specifically.
Yeah, cool. The problem is I have probably 100 others questions for now, and this would be too long. And one thing is, I don't agree with your testing strategies. So I mean, we are exactly opposite what you are promoting and what I am thinking. And what I would suggest is that we have another episode of the podcast if you have time. And without any introduction, we will just talk about test containers and the actual process of testing, because I had so many issues with integration unit tests without test containers, and I would like to talk with you about the challenges and why CI is still valuable on its own and stuff like that.
I would love to do this.
Yeah, so then we should do this. We try to schedule a date properly this year. It would be great, because otherwise we forgot what we actually chatted about. And this would, without hello world, just go straight to the topic. And I would be interested in black box, white box, unit tests, system tests, and stress tests. This is what I'm doing because I'm a consultant. I have to deliver software, and we're working with teams, and we are thinking about how to do that. So if you're okay with it, we will stop now and do another episode specifically about testing. And then, if you don't mind, next year about blockchain, of course. This would be great. But where can people find you? Your band, Iron Cobra, of course. And
yes.
So what's your Twitter handle?
So my Twitter handle is Kiview, or Kiviv if you want to speak it German.
And your band homepage, or your website, or GitHub repository? So
let me quickly check if it's ironcobra.de. There you can find us. There's also a link to Bandcamp where you can listen to all our records and all the stuff. And I'm basically everywhere in the web. I'm Kiviv or Kiview. So also my GitHub similar profile name also give you like Twitter.
Can the listeners enjoy you on YouTube? They will see your in action with guitar.
Yes, probably. Let me quickly Google. So if you Google for Iron Cobra, you will find live videos,
Yeah,
yes,
cool.
and also songs, and there you can also see me playing
So
live.
thank you. So I will watch it right away. So thank you, and see you soon, and to talk with you about test containers, right?
Yeah, thanks. It was great talking to you, and yes, I'm really looking forward to talk to you in more detail about testing strategies because it's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, perfect. So thank you and bye.
Thanks. Bye bye.